Hey there, Streakers. Hopefully you're having a fantastic Saturday. Mine is almost over, which means that this podcast is going out a little bit late. However, I haven't set this as a specific streak yet, but I'm on the verge. I think that what I'm going to do is set a streak to record at least one podcast every day. Now, the reason I would choose record at least one podcast every day rather than to publish at least one podcast every day is because a couple of times when I've been testing this streak out, I found that I haven't had access a couple of times to be able to publish the podcast. However, I could record it. So you'll notice if you go back in the archives, which I doubt anyone has done, I don't even do it, but if you go back in the archives, there's been a couple of times where I've published 2 podcasts on one day. And the reason? Because I recorded it, but was not able to publish it until I actually got to where I needed to be. So just a couple of little thoughts and ideas for you. One of the things that I do before setting a new streak is to test the waters, to see if it's really something that, one, I want to do, and number 2, not only do I want to do it, but what are the dependencies on which I rely in order to get the streak done? Does that make sense? In other words, in order to record a podcast, at least one podcast every day, I need a recording device of some sort. So that's a dependency. If I don't have a recording device, then how do I get the podcast done? So I have to minimize the dependency in the sense that, or minimize the risk that I won't have that dependency, that particular thing on which I depend. So, for example, I have with me my phone, my iPhone, and I use voice memos to go ahead and record the podcast for that day. Now, the second dependency, if it was to publish at least one podcast every day, the second dependency is having internet access and the opportunity to use our distribution service, which is Libsyn. So Libsyn is the one liberated syndicate or syndicated. But anyway, that's the service that we use to publish the podcast. And if that was not available or I didn't have access to the internet, then it would make it very difficult to complete the streak. Therefore, I don't put it as publish at least one podcast every day. I put it as record at least one podcast every day. So that's what I'm considering. Now, I have, again, if you look back, been pretty darn consistent at this. In other words, I have had the streak and kept the streak alive. And therefore, I'm on the verge of setting it as a streak. Now, one more reason as to why I don't right away set it as a streak, because once I do, then I will do everything in my power to keep that streak alive. Now, there's other streaks that I have, as you know, and have listened to, and those take energy, effort, and they consume a certain amount of time. Therefore, I have to weigh in the balance the other streaks that I have in my life to say, is this one that I'm willing to take the energy, the focus, the time necessary to complete it? And I'm about there. I think that I may do it. Now, what does all this have to do with anything in regards to the podcast right now today? Well, obviously telling you about how I set a streak, but more importantly, as you go about looking at your destination, where you want to be, who you want to be, and you've probably, if you're taking to streaking, you probably already have that in mind, and what you're looking for is the how I do this. Streaking is the how to what you want to become, to how to get to the destination where you want to be. And therefore, looking at what the streak is, how the streak's going to impact your life, what it is you're going to do to keep it alive, are critical components to be able to decide whether or not to do it. Now, for me, one of the reasons why I look at a podcast, there's a couple of different, what I call B statements in the book. In the streaking book, we have B statements in there, who you want to be. One of the conversations that I had with Whitney Johnson, she talked about then I am statement. And I look at the difference between the two, and there's quite a significant one. She said that the B to B statement is you're in the process of deciding who you want to be, Whereas an I am statement is you have decided who you want to be. Therefore, I changed my be statements to my I am statements. In other words, I have decided to be this person. Now, does it mean I've arrived at that particular destination? No. What it does mean, though, is I have decided to be that person, and therefore I will do the activities on a consistent basis that are necessary to become that person. One activity that I do every day is I write at least one sentence of my I am statement. And as I look at who I've decided to be, I am this particular person. The podcast, or what I'm suggesting to you right now as I've talked about the streak, is something that will help me to get to that destination. Therefore, I am going to the I am statement. I am this person is fully supported by the activities that I choose to do. Now, as you consider each one of those things, I have two more points I want to make for you in this particular podcast, in this episode. So, in looking at who I want to be and how I want to get there, and now deciding on the activity, one of the activities necessary to get there, you heard me talk about dependencies, you talk about me focus and effort. And the first law of streaking is making something laughably simple. I have read in I don't know how many sources, it's hundreds of sources, about making things simple or small or tiny, atomic, if you go with that one. All of these little tiny things that are necessary. I'm reading in Stephen M. R. Covey's book, The Speed of Trust, and it talks about the little things make a big difference. If you look in, and speaking of, so Tiny Habits is another one, Atomic Habits, another one, The Power of Habit. All of these talk about doing the smallest, simplest thing consistently. Now, the promise of a habit is that if you do it consistently for a long enough period of time, it will become automatic. However, that's not true for anything that is good growth behaviors. It's true for motor skills. It's true for maybe learning how to walk after suffering a stroke, which is a study that Charles Duhigg quoted and looked at. And I think James Clear also quoted and looked at it. But what laughably simple is in streaking is it's a deliberate, intentional act that you're going to do. And the reason you're making it laughably simple is because you want to do it every day. And there are some days where you just will not have the energy to do it. And there's other days where you'll be able to expend all the energy you want to. What you are striving to do with the laughably simple and the small is to get to that place of consecutiveness. It's not automacy. You're not trying to become automatic. You're not a robot. You're not programming yourself, even though it sounds really great. You're not doing it. One other question that I had, though, about the small things. Why are there so many books and talks and references to the small things? What is it about it that people keep on talking about this? As I was thinking about it, the reason why people keep talking about this is because no one believes it. No one actually believes that the smallest, simplest thing will get you to your destination. And why? Why don't we believe it? Because we've tried it and we did it for a couple of days, a few weeks, and it didn't work. Therefore, it's got to be this big thing. In actuality, it is the small thing. It's the time that it takes to get that small thing to work. In other words, the days in a row that you're doing it, or the weeks in a row, or the months in a row that you're doing it, in order for it to have any type of an impact on your life. In other words, you've got to build up the pressure behind the dam. You've got to put the engine in motion. It's the flywheel effect. It's the being able to put up the pressure necessary to break through whatever result or to break through to the result that you're aiming. You see, that's why you want the simple, small things. And that's why so many books are written on it, is because it does work. No one believes it. And the reason we don't believe it is because we haven't given it the time, the consecutiveness necessary to see if it works or not. So now back to where I started with this small little podcast. I decided that I'm going to record it at least one time every day. And with that, I hope to build up the pressure necessary to be able to break through to the area of where I want to be, or the person I have decided to be. And as I do that, and as you do it, you start to experience some significant success. In fact, the success is so significant, your confidence grows in a considerable way that you then consider your next streak and you're careful about it. Why? Because you know that you'll do it. If you want to learn more about streaking, download the Streakin app at the Apple App Store or Google Play. You can also contact me at any point in time that you want. Jeffrey, Jeffery, at thestreakingapp.com. Download the book from Amazon or, well, let's see here. I think it's at Amazon or iBooks or Books now that it's called Apple. Yes, it is. It's at both places. You can also buy the book at Amazon or anywhere books are sold. Do me a favor, wouldn't you mind, and pass it along by giving us a review or a rating on the podcast, on the app, on the book. Really appreciate it. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast so that you can be updated anytime that we have a little bit more to share with you in regards to how you can become who you want to be through streaking. Until next time, keep streaking.